Hey guys, tonight we walk the dark, opulent and paranoid halls of the Royal Palace in Madrid in the 1820 seconds. Our story follows Dr. Miquel, the king's personal physician. He's a quiet man of science, trapped in a court governed by superstition and fear. His patient, King Ferdinand VII, is desperate for an heir, but a strange, dark curse seems to haunt the royal bedchamber. The king's first wife died mysteriously, his second in a public medical horror, and his new young queen is terrified of him, refusing to perform her marital duty. The entire Spanish Empire, desperate for stability, whispers, "What is wrong with the king? What is the dark perversion that happens behind the royal bedchamber doors?" Let's be honest, Dr. Miquel is the only one who knows the truth. He has examined the king. It is not a curse. It is a bizarre, almost unbelievable physical secret. A secret so strange and sensitive, it has already cost lives and now threatens to ignite a bloody civil war that will tear the nation apart. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where in the world you're listening from, so please drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. May 1814. The city of Madrid is a sea of celebration. The air, thick with the smoke of celebratory bonfires and the ringing of 1,000 church bells, vibrates with a single deafening cry: "Viva el Rey! Viva Fernando! Viva el Deseado!" The desired one. After 6 long, humiliating years of war, of French occupation, of a king living in gilded captivity under Napoleon, Spain has finally, violently purged itself. The French are gone, and the king is returning. From the poorest barrios to the grand plazas, the people have poured into the streets, their joy a form of mass hysteria. They see in Ferdinand VII's return not just the restoration of a man, but the resurrection of Spain itself. They see a hero, a martyr, the living symbol of their national pride. But inside the cool, shadowed halls of the Royal Palace of Madrid, the atmosphere is not one of celebration. It is one of quiet, tense preparation. Here, Dr. Miquel, the newly appointed royal physician, waits. Dr. Miquel is a man of science, a rationalist trained to observe the facts beneath the performance. He hears the roar of the crowd outside the palace gates, but it is to him just noise, the sound of a populace projecting its desperate hopes onto a man they barely know. His concern is not with the symbol. His concern is with the man. He has been summoned for his first and most important duty, to conduct a full medical examination of the returning king. The doors to the royal chamber open. King Ferdinand VII enters. Dr. Miquel, a man of precise observation, notes the immediate, jarring disconnect between the public icon and the private man. The hero cheered in the streets does not enter the room. The man who enters is 30 years old, but carries himself with a heavy, sullen sluggishness. His face is pale and doughy, his eyes small and suspicious, darting around the room, assessing the guards, the secretaries, and Dr. Miquel himself. This is not the noble bearing of a returned hero. It is the paranoid, watchful demeanor of a man who has spent 6 years as a prisoner, surrounded by spies and flatterers, a man who has learned to trust no one. "Your Majesty," Dr. Miquel says, bowing low. "It is an honor to attend to your health." Ferdinand grunts, dismissing the pleasantry, and shrugs off his traveling cloak. The examination begins. Dr. Miquel is a physician. His hands are his primary tools of inquiry. He notes the king's soft, indolent flesh, the sign of a life with no vigorous exercise. He notes the slight, unhealthy puffiness around his eyes. As he listens to the king's heart through his stethoscope, he notes a steady, if sluggish, beat. The king is not, in any immediate sense, sick, but he is profoundly unhealthy, a man living entirely within his own body, driven by appetites rather than discipline. But the most disturbing part of the examination is not the physical, but the political. As Dr. Mikel performs his quiet, methodical checks, the king is already at work. He is not resting. He is not thanking the liberal Cortes, the government that fought and bled in his name, that wrote the radical, forward-thinking constitution of 1812 to create a new, modern Spain. No, he is systematically betraying them. That constitution, Ferdinand snarls to a waiting secretary, his voice a low, guttural rasp, is a foreign sickness, a French poison. It is to be nullified. Immediately, Dr. Mikel continues his work, his face a mask of clinical neutrality, as he listens to the king dictate the orders that will dismantle the government. Orders for the arrest of the leading liberal regents. Orders for the restoration of the absolute monarchy. And, most chillingly, an order for the immediate re-establishment of the Inquisition. Dr. Mikel finishes his examination. Your Majesty's constitution appears sound, the doctor says, his words carefully chosen. Ferdinand nods, barely listening. He is already a man consumed by the mechanics of his restored power. The people outside are cheering El Deseado, the desired one. They do not know that inside the palace, El Rey Felon, the felon king, has already returned. Dr. Mikel bows and retreats from the royal chamber, his medical bag in hand. He is filled with a deep, professional foreboding. He has just examined the physical body of the king and found it weak, but he has also witnessed the state of the king's political mind and found it to be paranoid, reactionary, and utterly ruthless. He realizes his new job will be far more complex than just prescribing diets and remedies. He is now the private physician to the most powerful, and perhaps the most unstable, man in Spain. And he knows that this king, having secured his political power, will now turn his focus to the one thing he lacks, a dynasty, an heir. Dr. Mikel's true and most dangerous work is about to begin. Dr. Mikel settles into his new life at the royal palace, a life of profound contradictions. His new quarters are vast and opulent, the ceilings high and covered in elaborate frescoes, the furniture heavy with gilded ornamentation. But the rooms are also cold, a deep, penetrating, and distinctly Spanish chill that no amount of firewood seems to remedy. The palace, he quickly learns, is a place of immense cold grandeur, a monument to a power that feels ancient and weary. The atmosphere is one of oppressive, watchful silence. The courtiers, priests, and servants who patrol the endless tapestried corridors move like shadows, their footsteps muffled on the thick carpets. They speak in low, guarded whispers, their eyes quick and furtive. They are a community defined by what is not said, a society held together by shared secrets and a collective, unspoken fear. Dr. Mikel, a man of science, a man who believes in the clear, observable, and rational, finds the air of the court to be suffocating, like the air of a sick room. He feels, in every stone of the building, the presence of a ghost. It is not a spectral phantom, but a memory, a story so potent and so tragic that it haunts the court 8 years after its conclusion. It is the ghost of Ferdinand's first wife, Maria Antonia of Naples. As the new royal physician, it is Dr. Mikel's duty to review the medical history of the king. He spends his first days in the royal archives, a dusty, silent room poring over the ledgers of his predecessors. He finds the official record of Maria Antonia's death in 1806. The pages are neat, the Latin precise. The cause of death, signed by 3 royal physicians, is listed as consumption, tuberculosis. It is a clean, simple, and tragically common end for a 19th century noblewoman. A frail constitution, 2 difficult miscarriages that weakened her, and finally, the inevitable wasting disease. His rational, scientific mind accepts this. It is a closed case, a simple tragedy. But the court, he learns, does not believe the official record. The whispers in the hallways, the fragmented conversations he overhears between servants, the veiled, cryptic warnings he receives from other courtiers, they all tell a different story. In the dark, paranoid world of Ferdinand's Spain, there are two, far more sinister versions of the truth. The first rumour is the one whispered most loudly, the one found in the salons and antechambers. This is the political story. Poison. Maria Antonia, they say, was not frail. She was intelligent, cultured, and, most dangerously, she was politically astute. She despised the real power in Spain, her mother-in-law Queen Maria Luisa, and the despised minister Manuel Godoy. She was a rival, a focus for an opposing faction at court. In this version of the story, her consumption was not a disease, but a symptom, a slow-acting, untraceable poison, perhaps administered in her daily cup of chocolate, a quiet, methodical assassination that removed a political threat. Dr. Miquel, a man who has read his ancient history, knows this is the classic, banal way of empires. It is entirely plausible. Then there is the second rumour. This one is different. It is not spoken in the salons. It is whispered in the darkest corners of the scullery, in the stables, among the old women who dressed the late Queen's body. It is a story of a different, more personal, and far more bizarre horror. This story speaks not of politics, but of the royal bedchamber. It speaks of a physical impossibility, of an anatomical curse. The whispers are vague, couched in the hushed, superstitious language of the uneducated, but they all point to the king himself. They speak of the marriage as a nightmare, of the young princess's terrified screams, of a union that was brutal and unnatural. In this telling, her two miscarriages were not misfortunes. They were the inevitable, tragic results of a physical act that her body could not endure. Her death, they whisper, was not from a disease of the lungs, but from catastrophic internal injuries, from a physical incompatibility that made the marriage bed a place of torture. Dr. Miquel, the man of science, tries to dismiss this. It is Gothic, it is vulgar, it is the stuff of peasant superstition, and yet it lingers in his mind. It is the one story that seems to explain the dark, sullen, and almost haunted look in Ferdinand's own eyes. It is the one story that connects the king's body, his new patient, directly to the death of his wife. Dr. Miquel sits in his cold, grand study, the official medical log open on his desk. Consumption. A clean, rational explanation. But his mind is filled with the echoes of the palace whispers. Poison. A cold, political calculation. Physical incompatibility. A dark, grotesque, and unnameable horror. His rational, scientific mind is now at war with the superstitious, paranoid rumour mill of the court. He knows his job is not to solve the past, but to manage the future. The king is 30 years old. The empire, unstable and recovering from war, desperately needs an heir. This means a new wife must be found. A new princess must be brought to this palace of whispers. And Dr. Miquel realizes, with a cold, dawning dread, that his true, terrible duty has just become clear. He must ensure that this new, young, and unsuspecting woman does not, in one way or another, become the next victim of the royal bedchamber. The ghost of Maria Antonia is not just a memory, it is a precedent. The death of Ferdinand's first wife, Maria Antonia, had been a personal tragedy, a political inconvenience, and a dark, whispering scandal. Now, 8 years later, the king is restored, and the need for a legitimate heir has transformed from a simple dynastic desire into an absolute, frantic, and immediate state emergency. The kingdom of Spain, Dr. Miquel observed, was a body in a state of deep, systemic unrest. The king, El Rey Felon, had betrayed the liberals, re-established the Inquisition, and ruled with a paranoid iron fist. His only true rivals were the Apostolicos, the ultra-reactionary faction who believed the king was not conservative enough. And their champion, their icon, their hope, was the king's younger brother, Don Carlos. Don Carlos was a constant, looming shadow in the cold halls of the palace. He was rigid, intensely pious, and he made no secret of his belief that he was the true, traditional heir to the throne. Every day that Ferdinand VII remained childless, Don Carlos's power grew. The entire court, Dr. Miquel saw, was divided into two quiet, warring camps, those loyal to the king, and those who were simply biding their time, waiting for Ferdinand to die and Don Carlos to inherit. Ferdinand, sullen and insecure, hated his brother with a cold, profound passion. He did not just want an heir, he needed one, as a political weapon, to destroy the ambitions of his rival. The solution, as always, was a political marriage. A new queen was found, a new womb procured for the state. She was Maria Isabel of Portugal, Ferdinand's own niece, a Bourbon, like him. She was young, reportedly healthy, and the alliance with Portugal was a sound one. She arrived in Madrid in 1816 amidst a fresh wave of public celebration, another desperate projection of the people's hope onto a new, royal face. Dr. Miquel's role in the court immediately and dangerously expanded. He was summoned by the king. "You will attend to the queen, doctor," Ferdinand commanded, his voice a low grunt, his eyes not on Miquel but on a document on his desk. "Your primary duty, above all else, is to ensure her health. You will see to it that she is fruitful." The command was unmistakable. Dr. Miquel was no longer just the king's physician. He was now the chief medical custodian of the royal succession. His new patient was not just the queen. His patient was the royal womb. He began his duties at once. He was given unrestricted access to the queen's chambers, a privilege that made him one of the most powerful and most watched men in the palace. He entered the strange, cloistered, and suffocating world of the queen's private life. Maria Isabel was a gentle, quiet, and deeply timid young woman. She was a prisoner, surrounded by a small army of black-clad ladies in waiting, spies who reported her every word, every mood, every physical symptom back to the competing factions of the court. Her life was not her own. It was a performance of queenship. Dr. Miquel's visits were a formal, clinical ritual. He would bow, ask his carefully worded questions. Was Her Majesty sleeping well? Was her appetite strong? And the central unspoken question upon which the entire empire balanced, had her monthly courses arrived? He would watch her as she answered, her hands twisting in the lap of her heavy silk dress, her eyes downcast. She was not just shy, she was terrified. She was a young, frightened girl, trapped in a cold palace, married to a sullen, intimidating man, and her entire worth as a human being had been reduced to a single biological function. Dr. Miquel, a man of science, saw not just a political entity, but a human patient. He saw the signs of profound stress, the pale skin, the trembling hands, the constant, low-level anxiety. And he saw something else. He would be called to her chambers after she had spent time with the king. He would find her in a state of quiet, weeping distress. Her ladies-in-waiting would whisper that she was unwell, that she was overly sensitive. But Dr. Miquel noticed the way she flinched when he tried to examine her, the deep, physical tenderness she seemed to be guarding. The whispers from Chapter 2, the dark, Gothic tales of Ferdinand's first wife, of a physical incompatibility, returned to his mind with a new, chilling force. Was this queen's terror not just of her husband's coarse nature, but of the act itself? Was her suffering psychological, or was it, as the old rumors suggested, agonizingly physical? He was a physician. He could not ask. He was trapped in a conspiracy of silence, his duty to the crown overriding his duty to his patient. He could only prescribe what he was allowed to: gentle sedatives for her nerves, iron tonics for her frailty, Months passed. Each new moon brought a fresh wave of whispers, of panic, of political maneuvering. Had the Queen conceived? Why not? Was she the problem? Don Carlos's faction grew more confident. Ferdinand's rages became more frequent. The pressure on the young Queen was unbearable. Then, one morning, the head lady-in-waiting summoned Dr. Mikel with a new, excited urgency. The Queen was sick. Her courses had not arrived. Dr. Mikel entered her chambers. He performed his examination. He asked his questions. He observed, and then he was able to confirm it. She was pregnant. The news exploded through the palace. The court, for a moment, was united in a single joyous celebration. The king was triumphant, his mood instantly, terrifyingly jubilant. He had done it. He had beaten his brother. Dr. Mikel was hailed as a miracle worker. But as he looked at the Queen, at the pale, terrified, and now pregnant girl, he felt no joy. He felt only a deep, cold, and terrible premonition. The national demand for an heir had been met, but the private, human fragility of the Queen was now entering a new, and perhaps even more dangerous, phase. Her body, which had already endured a mysterious private torment, was now facing the brutal, public, and often deadly ordeal of 19th century childbirth. He had not saved her. He had merely advanced her to the next, and final, stage of her sacrifice. The marriage to Maria Isabel of Portugal, which was meant to be the salvation of the dynasty, quickly proves to be a private, agonizing failure. The state, the court, and the king himself demand an heir, but the royal bedchamber, the very heart of that hope, remains a place of cold, barren duty. Weeks turn into months, and the young Queen does not conceive. As the royal physician, Dr. Mikel is trapped in the center of this silent crisis. His official duties now include regular, formal consultations with the Queen. He finds her in her chambers, a small, pale figure surrounded by the suffocating presence of her ladies-in-waiting. She is perpetually unwell, suffering from nervous headaches, melancholy, and a frailty of constitution. Dr. Mikel, in his clinical way, prescribes tonics and recommends rest, but he knows he is not treating a disease, he is treating a symptom. He sees the way she flinches when he asks about her marital duties, the flicker of terror in her eyes before she recites a prepared, hollow answer. The rumors he heard upon his arrival, the ghost stories of the first Queen, Maria Antonia, and the whispers of a physical incompatibility now take on a chilling, clinical reality. He is witnessing the same tragedy begin anew, a young, terrified woman trapped in a marriage that seems to be causing her profound physical and psychological distress. While the Queen wastes away in her perfumed, silent rooms, the king rots in his own, very different, prison of the mind. Ferdinand VII is consumed by his failure, and that failure manifests as a volatile, cruel paranoia. In public, he is the absolute monarch, rigid and pious, the man who has restored the Inquisition. In private, he is a different creature. He complains bitterly to Dr. Mikel about his new wife. She is weak, he snarls, his voice a low, sullen growl. Like the other one, frail. These foreign princesses are not strong enough for the blood of Spain. He blames her piety, her frailty, her youth, anything but himself. And all the while, he sees the shadow of his brother, Don Carlos. In every corridor, the smug, patient heir, growing stronger with every month the Queen's womb remains empty. Unable to cope, the king turns to escape, but his escape is not the refined, aristocratic pursuit of a mistress at court. That would be too elegant, too civilized. Ferdinand's nature is cruder, darker, rooted in the basest impulses. The whispers begin to reach Dr. Mikel, not from the high-born courtiers, but from the guards and the kitchen staff. They speak of the king's perverse new habit. 2 or 3 times a week, in the dead of night, he sheds his royal identity. Dressed in the rough, dark cloak of a common ruffian, his face hidden, he slips out of a small postern gate in the palace. He, the King of Spain and the Indies, descends into the lowest, most dangerous barrios, slums of Madrid. He is seen, they say, in the filthiest, most notorious taverns, places where sailors, thieves, and prostitutes gather. He drinks the raw, fiery wine of the gutter. He watches the lewd dancing. He indulges in the coarse, anonymous pleasures of the underworld. It is a shocking, reckless act, not just of infidelity, but of a king completely abdicating his own station. For Dr. Meikle, this rumour becomes a terrifying clinical reality. He is summoned late one night, not to the royal bedchamber, but to a small private study. The king is there, along with his one trusted corrupt aide. Ferdinand is drunk, his face flushed, but beneath the alcohol, he is in clear physical discomfort. He refuses to meet Meikle's eyes. "A private matter, doctor," the king grunts, his voice thick. Strain. From riding. Dr. Meikle, his face a mask of professional neutrality, performs his examination. It is not a riding strain, it is a venereal malady, the common, sordid sickness of the brothels. The physician is now the keeper of the most dangerous secret in Spain. He is treating the king for a disease acquired in the gutter, all while the queen is being blamed for the barrenness of their marriage. The hypocrisy is staggering. He must now, with all his medical skill, cure the king in secret, so that the king can return to the royal bedchamber and continue his agonizing, fruitless attempt to produce an heir. The king's public persona as the pious, absolute monarch and his crude, self-destructive private life are at war. He is a man rotting from the inside out, and he is dragging the kingdom down with him. Dr. Meikle prepares the mercury and the salves, the painful, ineffective treatments of the day. He instructs the king on their use, his voice a low clinical monotone, betraying no shock, no judgment. He is a physician, and this is his patient. But as he leaves the room, he understands the full, dark truth. The curse of the Bourbons is not a ghost or a political plot. It is the king himself. It is the rot of his character, the secret of his body, and the profound, desperate and dangerous hypocrisy of a man who would rather risk his health in the taverns of Madrid than confront the true, terrifying mystery of his own royal bed. 1818. For the first time in his tenure, Dr. Meikle feels a fragile, cautious optimism in the air of the palace. The young queen, Maria Isabel, is pregnant. The news, confirmed by Dr. Meikle with a mixture of clinical certainty and profound relief, has broken the court's sullen, paranoid spell. The king, Ferdinand VII, is transformed. His usual glowering, suspicious demeanor is replaced by a boisterous, almost manic joy. He holds great feasts. He orders lavish new decorations for the royal nursery. He speaks constantly of my son, the Prince of Asturias. In his mind, his dynasty is secure. His hated brother, Don Carlos, has been thwarted, his smug patience rendered irrelevant. The curse of the Bourbons, it seems, has finally been broken. Dr. Meikle's life is now governed by one sacred, all-consuming duty, the health of the Queen. He attends her daily, his presence a constant, anxious shadow. He monitors her diet, her sleep, her airings in the garden. The Queen herself, frail and timid by nature, seems to be bearing the burden of the state with a quiet, terrified grace. The entire, massive, creaking machinery of the Spanish Empire has narrowed its focus to this one, small, swelling abdomen. The political pressure is immense, but Dr. Meikle, a man of science, is pleased. The pregnancy, though delicate, appears to be progressing normally. The winter of 1818 is harsh. The Queen, her time approaching, is confined to her heavily curtained, stiflingly warm chambers. On December 26th, the day after Christmas, the labour begins. Dr. Meikle is summoned. He enters the royal bedchamber to find it no longer a private room, but a public stage. It is filled with a hushed, expectant crowd, priests murmuring prayers in the corner, anxious ladies in waiting, and a panel of the kingdom's most senior surgeons, their faces grim, their hands clasped, their very presence a dark, ominous foreboding. And in an antechamber, pacing like a caged animal, is the king himself. The labor is not easy. It is long, difficult, and agonizing. Hours stretch into a timeless, suffocating nightmare. The queen's youthful strength begins to fail. Her cries, at first strong and sharp, weaken into low, exhausted moans. Dr. Mikel, his face a mask of professional calm, consults with the surgeons. Their faces are pale. The child, they agree, is not presenting correctly. After more than a day of this ordeal, the child is finally born. A silence, heavy and absolute, falls over the room. The child, a daughter, is blue, her body limp. She is stillborn. The collective hope of the kingdom, which had been focused into this one room, evaporates in an instant. The priest's prayers turn to last rites. But the tragedy is not over. The queen, her body shattered by the long, fruitless labor, is hemorrhaging badly. She sinks into a state of shock, her skin turning the color of ash, her pulse becoming a faint, thready whisper beneath Dr. Mikel's fingers. Within an hour, she too is gone. She has died as her predecessor did in the service of the dynasty. A surgeon lays a sheet over her face. The room is filled with the sound of quiet, controlled weeping. Dr. Mikel steps back, his heart a cold, heavy stone. He is a physician. He has seen death. But this is a catastrophe of state. He is preparing to leave, to begin the grim, formal task of informing the king, when a sudden, sharp cry comes from one of the midwives, a woman who had been frantically, uselessly, massaging the dead queen's abdomen. "Wait!" she screams, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hysteria. "I feel it! I feel another! It is moving! There is another child inside her, still alive!" A jolt of pure, chaotic energy electrifies the room. The surgeons rush back to the bedside. Is it possible? A twin, still living, trapped in the womb of its dead mother. In this pre-modern, pre-stethoscope age, there is no way to be certain, no way to verify the midwife's panicked claim. The king bursts into the room, his face a mask of wild, contorted grief. "She is dead?" he roars. And then, seizing on the midwife's cry, "A child? There is another? Save it! I command you, save my heir." It is a command, not a medical consultation. The surgeons look at each other. The queen is, by all appearances, dead. The child might be alive. The law of the land is absolute. An unborn heir must be saved, even at the cost of its mother's body. What follows is an act of pure, medical desperation, a piece of Gothic horror. This is not a planned, delicate C-section. It is a post-mortem butchery, a frantic, terrible race against time. Dr. Mikel, horrified, must stand by and watch. He sees the chief surgeon, a man he has long respected, take a large, sharp, surgical knife from his kit. There is no ether, no antiseptic, no time for delicacy. They are operating on a woman they believe to be dead. The surgeon makes the first, deep, vertical incision into the queen's abdomen, and a sound that will haunt Dr. Mikel for the rest of his life, fills the room. It is not a gasp. It is a long, low, agonizing, and almost inhuman scream. The queen is not dead. Her eyes, which had been closed, fly open, wide with a final, mortal, and uncomprehending terror. She rises, her back arching off the bed, her mouth open in a silent, final scream of agony as the surgeon's knife, deep inside her, completes its terrible work. The room freezes. The surgeons, their hands covered in blood, recoil in absolute horror. The priests fall to their knees, their prayers turning to frantic, terrified cries. The king himself stares, his face a mask of pale, stunned disbelief. The queen collapses back onto the pillows, and this time she is truly, finally, and mercifully dead. Dr. Mikel stands paralyzed, the world a red, swimming haze. The surgeons, shaking, complete their grim task. There is no second child. There was never a second child. The midwife's hysterical hope was a fatal delusion. He, a man of science, has just borne witness to the live, ritualistic butchery of his own queen, an act of medical desperation driven by a king's madness and a midwife's fantasy. The rumours of the royal bedchamber being a place of horror are no longer just rumours. He has seen it with his own eyes. The curse of the Bourbons is not just a whisper of poison or a rumour of incompatibility. It is a real, tangible, and bloody horror, and he knows, as he prepares the death certificate for the second queen to die under his king's reign, that this story will be buried. The official report will be a simple, tragic lie. But the whispers in the palace, and the terror in the king's own heart, will now be uncontainable. The year 1819 begins with the kingdom in a state of quiet, desperate panic. The horrific, bloody end of Queen Maria Isabel has not just been a personal tragedy for the king, it has been a public catastrophe. 2 queens are now dead, and the royal nursery remains empty. In the cold, grand halls of the palace, the shadow of Don Carlos lengthens. His quiet, confident piety is a constant, silent reproach to his brother's chaotic and seemingly cursed life. The Carlist faction, those ultra-conservative nobles and priests who see Don Carlos as the true heir, grows bolder. The kingdom must have a direct heir. Ferdinand VII, now 35 and consumed by his failure, demands a new wife. Immediately. The search is frantic, and the criteria have changed. The great courts of Europe are now wary. The Spanish throne, it seems, is a lethal prospect for a young princess. The ideal candidate is no longer just about political alliance. She must be, above all, healthy, young, and compliant. The choice, made with desperate speed, falls upon a princess from a quieter, less politically troublesome house, Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony. On paper, she is the perfect solution. She is young, just 16 years old. She is from a famously fertile line, and she is known for her deep, unshakable, and profound piety. The king, whose own perversions are a poorly kept secret, sees this as a virtue. He is tired of intelligent, political women like his first wife, or the frail, weak-willed Maria Isabel. A pious, obedient, simple girl, he believes, will be the perfect vessel, a blank page on which he can write his dynasty. Dr. Mikel is part of the small, formal party that receives the new queen when she arrives in Madrid. The city, as always, musters a public cheer, a desperate, manufactured hope for this new mother of the nation. But as Dr. Mikel watches the young princess step down from her carriage, his heart sinks. She is not just young, she is a child, small and bird-like, with a pale, almost translucent convent pallor. She is not just pious, she is terrified. She clutches a large, dark crucifix in her hand as if it is a shield, her knuckles white. She flinches at the sound of the welcoming cannon fire. Her eyes, wide and frightened, dart from the faces of the stern Spanish courtiers to the ground, never meeting anyone's gaze. She is not a queen, she is a 16-year-old novice, ripped from the sheltered, silent world of the convent that raised her and thrown into the center of the most decadent, gossiping, and predatory court in Europe. Dr. Mikel is presented to her, in his capacity as her new personal physician. He bows, offering a few words of welcome and inquiry about her health. She cannot speak. She just nods, her eyes filling with a silent, overwhelmed terror and shrinks behind her new ladies in waiting. The wedding is a swift, opulent affair. The king is visibly pleased, his mood brighter than it has been in years. He has his new bride. He has his new chance. That night, the great feast is held, and the ancient public rituals of the royal wedding night are observed. The next morning, Dr. Meikle attends the king. He finds Ferdinand not in a state of triumph, but in a cold, black rage. "She is a fool," the king snarls, throwing a wine glass against the wall. "An imbecile, a child. Dr. M. What has happened, Meikle?" His face, a mask of careful neutrality, waits. "She will not. She refuses." Ferdinand rages. "She is terrified of me. She spent the entire night on her knees praying, clutching that damned cross as if I were the devil himself." The full, disastrous scope of the situation becomes clear. The king's urgent, dynastic need for an heir he must produce now, has just collided with the one immovable object in the universe, the profound, pathological, religious terror of a 6-year-old girl who has been taught her entire life that the pleasures of the flesh are a mortal sin. Dr. Meikle, a man of science, is now trapped. He must somehow find a medical solution for a theological problem. He suggests gentle tonics for the Queen's nerves, soothing draughts to help her sleep, a quiet period of acclimatization. But the king is not a patient man, and Don Carlos is still waiting. Dr. Meikle leaves the royal chambers, the sound of the king's curses following him down the hall. He walks to the Queen's wing of the palace. He finds her, not in her state bed, but in her private chapel, already on her knees before a vast, dark crucifix. She is weeping, praying, a small, broken figure in a sea of cold marble. He, the physician, is the man caught in the middle. The king's urgent, physical, and political need for an heir is at war with the Queen's profound, terrified, and spiritual refusal. He knows, with a sinking dread, that he will be the one tasked with bridging this impossible, terrible gap. 1820. Months have passed since the hopeful, opulent wedding of King Ferdinand and his new young queen, Maria Josepha. The brief celebrations, the manufactured optimism, have long since faded, replaced by a cold, familiar, and deeply unsettling silence. Spring has turned to a hot, stifling summer, and the court at the Palace of Aranjuez is a tinderbox of tension. The one, simple, all-important question that hangs in the air, unspoken at every state dinner, in every whispered conversation in the corridors, remains unanswered. There is no sign of a royal pregnancy. As the king's physician, Dr. Meikle is at the epicenter of this silent, unfolding crisis. His days are a new kind of hell, a delicate, agonizing balancing act. He must attend to the king, who has returned to his sullen, paranoid state, his brief hope curdled into a cold, quiet rage. He must also attend to the queen. His visits to Maria Josepha's chambers are exercises in futility. He finds the young queen a prisoner, not of the state, but of her own profound pathological piety. Her rooms have been transformed into a cold, austere convent cell. The light is kept dim, the air thick with the scent of prayer candles and incense. She is always attended by her stern, black-clad German confessors who watch Dr. Meikle with undisguised suspicion. The queen is a ghost. She is pale, thin, and her eyes are constantly red-rimmed from weeping. When Dr. Meikle, in his gentle, clinical voice, inquires after her health, her marital duties, she flinches, clutching the large crucifix that never leaves her hand. She refuses to be examined, her ladies in waiting explaining that she is too modest and in a state of constant prayer. The rumours, once confined to the whispers of servants, now become the open, frustrated gossip of the entire court. The queen, they say, is a frigid nun. She is a Saxon ice block. They tell stories of how she bolts the door to her bedchamber, spending her nights on her knees on the cold, stone floor, praying for deliverance from her sinful duties. They say she has confided in her confessor that the king's marital expectations are mortal sins, brutal, animalistic acts that are terrifying to God. The court and the nation have their answer. The problem is not the king, it is the queen. She is a religious fanatic, a child who has mistaken her royal duty for a sin. Dr. Mikel listens to this public verdict, and his mind, trained in the rational diagnosis of symptoms, is not so sure. He, alone, carries the institutional memory of the royal bedchamber. He remembers the whispers surrounding the death of Maria Antonia. He remembers the absolute butchered horror of Maria Isabel's death. He has seen the king's perversions and knows the dark, crude nature that lies beneath the royal veneer. Now, he watches this terrified, 6-year-old girl. Is her piety the true cause of her terror? Or is it a convenient, respectable shield for a more primal fear? Did she, on her wedding night, encounter the same dark, physical, and perhaps agonizing incompatibility that may have destroyed her predecessors? Is she locking her door not against a sin, but against a physical curse that she, a girl raised in a convent, has no words to describe? The public assumption that the Queen is the problem is a simple, clean, and convenient narrative. But Dr. Mikel, with his grim, specialized knowledge, suspects a darker, more complex, and more dangerous truth. He suspects the king himself is the common denominator in this repeating tragic equation. But he is powerless. He is a physician, not a confessor. He cannot treat a problem that no one will name. The crisis is now at a breaking point. The king is being publicly humiliated, his virility and authority mocked in the whispers of his own court. His hated brother, Don Carlos, the heir presumptive, waits in the wings, his face a mask of patient, pious concern that Dr. Mikel reads as pure, triumphant ambition. The entire, unstable future of the Spanish Empire once again balances on the terrible, secret drama of the royal bedchamber. And Dr. Mikel, the one man who is beginning to suspect the truth, is trapped in the middle, his scientific mind forced to bow to a mystery that is protected by the absolute, unquestionable power of the king. The unconsummated marriage is no longer just court gossip. It has become a full-blown crisis of state. Months have bled into a year. The young Queen Maria Josepha remains a virtual recluse in her chambers, a fortress of prayer and piety. Don Carlos, the king's brother, makes no secret of his satisfaction. His Carlist faction now operating as a government in waiting. The entire kingdom is watching the royal bedchamber, and it remains stubbornly, defiantly empty. Dr. Mikel finds himself in an untenable position. He is a physician, but the ailment he is expected to treat is not of the body, but of the state. His tonics for the Queen's nerves are returned untouched. His recommendations for fresh air and gentle exercise are ignored. He is a man of science, trapped in a medieval drama of faith and fear. The summons, when it comes, is not a polite request. It is a sharp, angry command. Dr. Mikel is called to the king's private study. He finds Ferdinand VII not in his usual sullen, lethargic state, but in a cold, vibrating rage. The king is pacing the room, his fists clenched, his face a mottled, unhealthy red. He does not wait for Dr. Mikel to bow. She defies me, the king snarls, his voice a low growl. This Saxon nun. She defies her king and her God. Dr. Mikel stands silently, his medical bag in hand, a familiar, useless prop. He knows better than to speak. For months I have been patient, Ferdinand continues, his voice rising. I have respected her modesty. I have endured her prayers. But this is no longer piety. It is rebellion. It is a willful, treasonous refusal to do her duty. He stops pacing and fixes his small, suspicious eyes on Dr. Mikel. You are my physician. Your purpose is to fix what is broken. And she is broken. She is sick in the mind. She weeps when I approach her. She calls the marital act a sin. It is a delusion, a madness. He slams his fist on the heavy oak desk. I demand you cure her of it. Dr. Mikel feels a cold, professional dread. This is the moment he has feared. Your Majesty, he begins, his voice calm and measured. A phobia of the mind is not like a fever of the body. It cannot be cured with a simple potion. Then make a potion. Ferdinand roars. You are a man of science. Find a way. Give her a draught to calm her nerves, a tonic to strengthen her constitution. Read her the medical texts. Instruct her. I do not care what it takes. You are to make her a wife. You are to fix her. In this single violent command, Dr. Mikel sees the king's entire, deluded worldview. The failure cannot be his. The king is absolute, his will supreme, his body the symbol of the state's virility. Therefore, the flaw must lie with the queen. She is the broken part of the machine. But Dr. Mikel is a physician. He has seen too much. His mind, trained to observe, is piecing together a different, far more dangerous diagnosis. He thinks of the ghost of the first queen, Maria Antonia, and the whispers of physical incompatibility. He thinks of the horrific, fatal butchery of the second queen, Maria Isabel, and the rumors of a physically traumatic birth. And now, he sees this third queen, a girl paralyzed by a terror so profound she is willing to defy an absolute monarch. 3 different women, one common denominator. The problem is not with them, the problem is with the king. Dr. M, what is it, Mikel's mind, in a flash of clinical intuition, begins to suspect the truth. This is not a psychological issue, it is a physical one. But it is not the queen's. He stands in the dark study, the king's furious, demanding gaze upon him. He is trapped in the most dangerous conflict of his life. He is a physician, and his growing suspicion tells him this is a medical, not a psychological, problem. But he is a subject, and he knows, with absolute, life-ending certainty, that he cannot question the king. He cannot so much as hint that the fault may lie with the royal person. To do so would not just be his ruin. It would be high treason. The king's absolute power, his pathological refusal to be questioned, forms an impenetrable wall around the truth. Dr. Mikel must obey the lie. Your Majesty is right, Dr. Mikel says, bowing his head, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The queen's nerves are clearly in a delicate state. Her pious upbringing has, perhaps, inflamed her sensibilities. I will prepare a new tonic for her, a special formulation to calm her mind and prepare her for her duties. Ferdinand grunts, his rage momentarily placated. He has received his answer. The blame is where he needs it to be, on his wife. Dr. Mikel retreats from the royal chamber, his mind a storm of cold, terrible, and unprovable theories. He has been given an impossible, unethical order to cure a healthy woman of a sickness that does not exist, all to cover for a physical deformity in a king so powerful and so insecure that he would rather see a third queen destroyed than admit to his own imperfection. He now understands his true role in this court. He is not a healer. He is a custodian of the king's most dangerous secret. Dr. Mikel returned to his study, the king's furious command fix her echoing in the quiet book-lined room. He was a man of science, and the king's diagnosis of pious delusion felt incomplete, a convenient mask for a deeper, messier problem. 3 queens, 3 different women from different parts of Europe, all reacting with either mysterious illness, catastrophic death, or abject terror. The king was the only common variable. The problem, Mikel concluded with a cold, logical dread, was not with the queens, it was with the king. He was now treading on the most dangerous ground imaginable. To even think such a thing was treason. But he was a physician before he was a courtier, and his mind was now consumed by a purely medical mystery. He began to search, not in the gossip of the court, but in the only place the truth might be hidden, the sealed, private medical archives of his predecessors. Late that night, by the light of a single, steady candle, he unsealed the slim, bound ledger of the physician who had tended to the king's first wife, Maria Antonia. The official pages were filled with the expected: tonics for nervous disposition, remedies for coughs, and the final, tragic entries detailing her decline from consumption. It was all perfectly ordinary, but tucked into the back of the volume, a small folded piece of parchment, not part of the official log, fell free. It was a private note, written in a cramped, hurried hand by the previous physician to a colleague. Dr. Mikel unfolded it. It was not a report. It was a desperate plea for advice. "I cannot speak of this plainly," the letter read, "but the impediment to an heir is not with Her Majesty. His Majesty, the Prince, is vigorous. Indeed, he is vigorous to a degree that is unnatural. His conformation is alarming. It is a matter of pure physical mechanics. She is small, he is prodigious. Every attempt at his royal duty leaves her in a state of physical terror and undeniable clinical distress. How can I treat a queen for a king's abundance?" Dr. Mikel stared at the brittle, faded page, the words leaping out at him. Prodigious, alarming, physical mechanics. A half-remembered detail from his own examination of the king back in 1814, something he had noted as a simple curiosity and dismissed, now flooded back into his mind with the force of a revelation. He recalled his own clinical surprise at the king's physical proportions, an unusual, almost abnormal largeness. He had dismissed it as a simple, harmless anomaly. Now, with this letter, he saw it as the key. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place with a horrifying, sickening speed. The first queen's miscarriages and death from complications likely the result of internal tearing and constant agonizing pain. The second queen's horrific, fatal childbirth, her body perhaps already weakened or damaged, unable to withstand the ordeal. And now, the third queen, Maria Josepha, a sheltered 16-year-old whose terror was not of a sin, but of a very real, very rational, and very agonizing physical act. This was not a curse. It was an anatomical mismatch of a grotesque and dangerous scale. The condition had a name in the obscure texts of medicine, macrogenitosomia. He now understood the king's perversions, his crude nightly escapes into the brothels of Madrid. It was not just a pursuit of pleasure. It was a desperate, humiliated flight to a world where his abundance was not a source of pain and failure, but a commodity, a novelty, a source of the very virile pride he could not find in his own royal bedchamber. The king's public obsession with his own virility was a desperate mask, a shield to hide the humiliating, bizarre secret that his very strength was the source of his impotence. Dr. Mikel sat back in his chair, the full, terrible weight of this knowledge settling upon him. He was now, without question, the most dangerous man in Spain. He was the only living person to have solved the king's mystery. He was the keeper of a secret so profound and so humiliating that Ferdinand VII had built his entire, cruel, reactionary reign upon its concealment. The conflict was no longer abstract. It was a stark, clinical reality. The king's powerful, virile self-image was a complete and fragile fantasy, at war with the bizarre, physical truth of his own body. Dr. Mikel understood that his job was no longer to heal the king or to cure the queen. His job was to become a silent, complicit partner in the king's lie. He had to guard this anatomical secret with his own life, because he knew with absolute certainty that if the king ever suspected what he knew, he would not live to see the dawn. The old, faded letter from his predecessor rests on Dr. Mikel's desk, its terrible secret now exposed. The doctor sits in his study, the candle burning low, the world outside the palace walls silent. He feels a profound, isolating chill that has nothing to do with the room's temperature. He is now, by accident, the keeper of the most dangerous secret in Spain. He is the only man alive who understands the full, bizarre, and tragic truth of the royal bedchamber. This knowledge reframes everything. It is a key that unlocks the king's entire, contradictory personality. Ferdinand VII's cruelty, his reactionary paranoia, his violent rejection of all liberal thought. Miquel now sees it all as the desperate overcompensation of a man haunted by a profound, physical, and deeply humiliating secret. The king's virility, the very symbol of his absolute power, is a monstrous, unusable, and cursed thing. His public obsession with being the all-powerful Rey Absoluto is a shield to protect his private, fragile masculinity. His crude, lecherous escapes into the brothels of Madrid are not just perversions, as the court whispers. They are a desperate, sad flight to a world where his abnormal abundance is not a source of pain and failure, but a brief, anonymous commodity. Dr. Miquel looks at the useless bottles of tonics and sedatives on his shelf. He is a physician, sworn to heal. He now knows the true diagnosis. The problem isn't a nervous queen, it's an anatomical, mechanical impasse. But what cure can he possibly prescribe? There is no surgery for this. There is no medicine. And more importantly, there is no speaking of it. To tell the king, Your Majesty, the fault is not in your wives, but in your own body, would be a death sentence. It would be the ultimate act of treason, an unforgivable assault on the king's fragile, monstrous ego. Ferdinand would not hear a medical diagnosis. He would hear an accusation of being a monster, a failure, a man unfit to be king. Dr. Miquel would be in a dungeon, or dead, by morning. He is trapped. His medical oath commands him to do no harm, but the king's absolute power demands he participate in the harm. By staying silent, he allows the charade to continue, allows the blame to fall on the innocent Queen Maria Josepha. By speaking, he destroys himself. The next day, he is summoned to the Queen's chambers. He finds her there, a pale, trembling figure, clutching her rosary. The king is also there, pacing the room, his face a mask of sullen anger. Doctor, the king snarls, not even looking at Miquel. Your tonics are not working. She still refuses me. She still hides behind her prayers. Fix her. Dr. Miquel bows, his face a mask of calm, clinical neutrality. He turns to the Queen. Your Majesty, he says, his voice soft, I have a new preparation. A stronger, more effective nerve tonic to calm the spirits and prepare the body for its duties. He holds out the small vial. It is a harmless mixture of valerian and sweetened water. It is a lie, a placebo. The Queen looks at him, her eyes wide with the terror of a cornered animal, and she drinks it. The king watches, his expression one of pure, frustrated impatience. Dr. Miquel stands in the cold, opulent room, a man of science forced to perform a role in a superstitious Gothic play. He is no longer a healer, he is a concealer. He is a vital, silent participant in the conspiracy of silence that protects the king. His medical oath and his knowledge of the truth are now his own private, agonizing burden. He realizes his new terrible function in this court. He is the man who must treat the symptoms of the king's secret, but never, ever name the disease. He must prescribe useless tonics to cure a terrified, healthy queen, all to protect the unmentionable, anatomical pride of a broken, paranoid, and all-powerful king. His own survival now depends on his absolute, terrified silence. By 1825, the crisis has escalated beyond the walls of the palace. The unconsummated marriage of King Ferdinand and Queen Maria Josepha is no longer a whispered rumour. It is a full-blown state crisis. The kingdom is restless, the economy is failing, and the line of succession is dangerously unstable. In the churches of Madrid, prayers are offered for the Queen's fruitfulness, a public acknowledgement of the empty royal cradle. The primary beneficiary of this failure is Don Carlos, the king's younger brother. He waits, his face a mask of rigid piety, as his Carlist faction grows stronger by the day. Every month that passes without news of a royal pregnancy is a victory for him. He is the heir presumptive, and his impending rule promises a return to an even more severe, ultra-conservative Spain. The entire court, and the future of the nation, is paralyzed, held hostage by the silence from the royal bedchamber. Dr. Miquel is a man trapped in the heart of this silent storm. He continues his useless charade, prescribing tonics for the Queen's nerves and bland dietary advice for the king, all while possessing the one secret that explains everything. He watches Ferdinand grow more desperate, his paranoia coiling into a cold, vindictive rage. The king, constitutionally incapable of accepting any personal flaw, has found his scapegoat. Not his wife's body, but her mind. He is convinced the problem is her convent-bred delusion. She is not unable to perform her duty. She is refusing it out of a childish, religious terror. Ferdinand decides to bring a new, unassailable weapon to bear on his terrified 16-year-old wife. He will move the conflict from the bedchamber to the international stage. He will not be defied. He will appeal to the only authority on earth higher than himself, the Pope. The narrative shifts from the dark, private rooms of the palace to the grand, political theatre of international diplomacy. Dr. Miquel can only watch in stunned, silent disbelief as Ferdinand instructs his ambassadors. The King of Spain, in a formal, secret diplomatic overture, appeals directly to Pope Leo XII in Rome. The appeal is a masterpiece of manipulation. Ferdinand presents himself as a devout, dutiful husband, eager to fulfill his sacred duty to the nation, who is being thwarted by a young queen so pathologically pious, so deluded by her provincial confessors, that she believes the marital act itself is a mortal sin. He is not asking for an annulment. He is asking the Holy Father to instruct his wife, to explain that her duty to her king is also her duty to God. This is a move of breathtaking absurdity. The vast international machinery of the Church and the Spanish state is being mobilized to solve a problem that Dr. Miquel knows is purely physical. Dr. Miquel stands in his study, looking at the anatomical texts that hold the truth. He thinks of the king, in his sullen, ignorant rage, blaming his wife's soul for a problem rooted in his own flesh. He thinks of the Pope in Rome, a distant, powerful figure, now being drawn into this intimate, physical tragedy under a completely false pretense. He realizes the sheer, insane scale of the conspiracy of silence. The king's curse is so profound that he is willing to engage the two greatest thrones in Christendom, his own and that of the papacy, in a high-stakes diplomatic farce, all to avoid a simple, private, and humiliating physical truth. The vast power of church and state is being summoned not to solve the real problem, but to bypass it, and, in doing so, to place an unbearable, divine pressure on the one, terrified girl who is its true victim. 1825. The diplomatic appeal to the Vatican, an act of almost unimaginable audacity, has been sent. The palace settles into a period of tense, expectant waiting. King Ferdinand VII is grimly confident. He has escalated his private, domestic struggle to the highest court on earth and expects a verdict in his favor. Dr. Miquel, meanwhile, is a prisoner of his own silent, terrible knowledge. He continues his daily useless visits to Queen Maria Josepha, a young woman who is now, effectively, on trial, her fate being debated in the sacred halls of Rome. The response arrives in the spring. It is not a quiet, private letter. It is a formal papal decree, carried by a high-ranking nuncio from the Vatican. A special solemn audience is convened. Dr. Miquel is summoned to the Queen's private chapel, a small, cold room of dark wood and gleaming gold crucifixes. The air is thick with the scent of old incense and beeswax. It is a scene of profound, theatrical gravity. The king is present, not in his usual sullen attire, but in his full, formal regalia, his chest covered in medals. He is here not as a husband, but as the King of Spain, receiving a judgment from his only superior. The king's ministers and the queen's terrified ladies in waiting line, the walls, silent witnesses, and at the centre, on a simple prayer stool, kneels the queen. She is a small, pale 6-year-old girl, dressed in a simple, high-necked gown, her face a mask of pure, submissive terror. The papal nuncio, his robes a brilliant, stark purple, breaks the wax seal on the document with a sharp crack. He begins to read the letter from His Holiness, Pope Leo XII. The Pope's voice, translated through the nuncio, is not one of anger. It is one of gentle, paternal, and deeply condescending instruction. He addresses the Queen as his beloved daughter, praising her for her famous piety, her devotion to the Church, her spotless virtue. He speaks of her innocence as a jewel in the crown of Christendom. Dr. Miquel stands near the back, his physician's bag in his hand, a prop of sanity in a world gone mad. He listens, his mind a storm of cold, clinical disbelief. The letter continues, its language shifting delicately. The Pope explains that her sacred marriage is not just a union of two people, but a divine sacrament, a pillar of the state. He gently, almost poetically, begins to explain the marital duty. He frames it not as the base, animalistic act she fears, but as a holy, generative, and blessed function ordained by God himself. He speaks of the sacred duty of a queen to provide an heir to the throne, explaining that this, too, is a form of prayer, an act of profound service to God and to her kingdom. It is, Dr. Miquel realizes with a sense of dizzying absurdity, a lesson. The supreme pontiff of the Catholic Church, the spiritual leader of 1 billion souls, has been mobilized to write a letter to a terrified teenage girl, explaining the basic biological facts of life. He watches the king's face. Ferdinand is not embarrassed. He is triumphant. His expression is one of smug, profound vindication. The Pope himself has confirmed it. The problem is not him, not his body, not his curse. The problem is his wife's childish, naive, and deluded piety. He has been officially absolved by God's own vicar. Dr. Miquel's gaze shifts to the Queen. She is trembling, her eyes squeezed shut, her knuckles white on the crucifix she clutches. She is a girl who has been raised to believe that the Pope's word is the word of God. And God has just, in a formal sealed document, commanded her to submit to the act that she finds so mysteriously, instinctively terrifying. Her religious terror is now at war with a divine command. Her last, sacred defense, her own piety, has been turned against her. The letter is finished. The nuncio refolds the parchment. A profound, heavy silence fills the chapel. The king looks at his wife, his expression one of hard, cold expectation. Slowly, painfully, as if moving a great weight, Queen Maria Josepha bows her head. I will obey, she whispers, her voice so low it is barely audible. I will do my duty. For God and for Spain. Dr. Miquel stands frozen, a witness to this farcical, tragic cure. The entire, vast, international power of the Church and the Spanish state has been brought to bear on this one, small, frightened girl. They have solved the problem, but they have solved it by simply ignoring the truth. He knows what this means. His silent, agonizing knowledge of the king's true, physical, and dangerous anatomical problem makes this scene a grotesque medical horror. The Queen has not been cured of a delusion. She has just been stripped of her last, desperate, and, as he now realizes, rational line of defense. She has been commanded by her God to walk willingly into a situation that her body has been screaming is agonizing and dangerous. The absurd, high-level diplomatic solution has just become a death sentence in all but name. The Pope's letter was an absolute, divine command. It was a key that unlocked the door to the Queen's bedchamber, a door that her own terror had held firmly barred. Queen Maria Josepha, her piteous religious defense shattered, relents. She is a devout, obedient daughter of the Church, and the Church itself has commanded her to submit. The unconsummated marriage is, at last, consummated. The court breathes a collective, cautious sigh of relief. The state's machinery has, it seems, triumphed. The king is no longer in a cold rage. He is expectant, waiting. The crisis is apparently over, but for Dr. Mikel, the crisis has merely entered a new, more horrifying, and more intimate phase. He is the Queen's physician, and he is the only one who understands the true, physical nature of the duty she is now forced to endure. His role shifts from prescribing useless tonics for her nerves to treating the very real, physical consequences of her obedience. He is summoned to her chambers regularly, not to treat a delusion, but to treat chronic, agonizing pain. He finds her pale, weeping, and bruised. He sees the physical evidence of the anatomical incompatibility that his predecessor hinted at. He is now, in the most literal sense, the man tasked with patching up the damage caused by the king's curse. His visits are a grim, silent ritual. He prepares soothing salves, laudanum for the pain, and sleeping draughts for the terror that now haunts her nights. He sees a woman, barely 17, who is being systematically, physically, and spiritually broken. Her youthful piety, once a source of terror, has now become a source of grim, uncomplaining martyrdom. She is, as she sees it, suffering for God and for Spain, and the marriage remains barren. Months turn into a year, then 2, then 3. The agonizing, dutiful ritual of the royal bedchamber continues, but it produces no heir. The curse, it seems, is not just one of pain, but of sterility. Dr. Mikel, a man of science, wonders if the king's abundance is not only a physical impediment, but a biological one. With every passing childless year, the king's mood darkens, his brief hope souring back into his familiar sullen paranoia. Don Carlos, his brother, waits patiently, his shadow lengthening over the court. The king is now in his 40s, his health beginning to fail, and the succession is still unsecured. The queen, Maria Josepha, sinks into a profound, irreversible melancholy. She is a ghost in the palace, a frail, silent figure who moves only between her bedchamber and the chapel. The physical and psychological torment of her marriage has consumed her. She has, as George Percy wrote of Jamestown, been worn out with cruelties. In May 1829, she takes to her bed with a fever. It is a simple sickness, a cold that a healthy person would shrug off in a week. But Maria Josepha is not healthy. She has no will left, no physical or spiritual resilience to fight. Her body, weakened by years of pain and stress, simply gives up. Dr. Mikel is called to her bedside. He sees at once that this is the end. She is 25 years old, but she looks like a frail, ancient woman. She is almost translucent, her eyes large and vacant, staring at the crucifix on the wall. The king is there, pacing, his frustration now mixed with a strange, helpless fear. He is watching, for a third time, as a wife slips away from him. She dies quietly, without a word, as the sun sets over the gardens of Aranjuez. Dr. Mikel signs the third death certificate of a Spanish queen. The official cause will be a wasting fever, but he knows the true cause. He knows she died of the cure, not the sickness. She was a victim of the Pope's letter, of the king's ambition, and of a dark, physical secret that no one dared to name. He watches as the king, now 45, unhealthy and definitively childless, slumps into a chair. The triumph of Don Carlos is now absolute. The curse has won. It has claimed another victim, destroyed another marriage, and now it has, for all intents and purposes, ended the king's line. The state had successfully enforced the queen's duty, But the fatal outcome of that duty has left the king in a state of ultimate, profound despair. He is a man who has lost everything, most of all the one battle that defined his entire reign. 1829. The death of Queen Maria Josepha plunges the royal palace into a new, profound, and seemingly final gloom. 3 queens are dead. The royal nursery is silent. The king, Ferdinand VII, is now 45 years old, his health in a state of steady, visible decline. He is childless. The curse of the royal bedchamber, the dark, unnameable secret that Dr. Miquel carries in his heart, appears to have won. For Don Carlos, the king's younger brother, this is not a tragedy, it is a victory. His long, patient and pious waiting has finally paid off. He is now, by all laws of God and man, the undisputed heir to the Spanish throne. His Carlist faction, the ultra-conservative nobles and priests who despise Ferdinand's compromises, no longer bothers to hide their satisfaction. They move through the court with a new proprietary heir. They are not just waiting for the king to die, they are measuring the drapes. Dr. Miquel, in his daily duties, feels the shift in power. His primary patient, the king, is increasingly isolated, a figure of pity and quiet contempt. Ferdinand is suffering from severe attacks of gout, his body swollen and in constant pain. He is sullen, depressed, and consumed by a cold, impotent rage. He sees the smug, righteous face of his brother in every shadow. He has been defeated, not by a foreign army or a liberal revolution, but by his own body, by his own dark, anatomical secret. Miquel's role has been reduced to one of palliative care. He prepares laudanum for the king's gout. He advises a diet he knows Ferdinand will ignore, and he watches as his monarch slowly, bitterly, fades, his dynasty ending with him. The game, it seems, is over. Then, one evening in late 1829, Dr. Miquel is summoned to the king's chambers. He expects to find Ferdinand in another fit of gout-induced pain. Instead, he finds the king on his feet, his face pale but his eyes burning with a new, terrifying, and almost manic energy. "They are celebrating, Miquel," the king hisses, gesturing to the halls outside, where the quiet confidence of the Carlists is palpable. They think it is over. They think he has won. Ferdinand slams his fist on the table. "I will not be the last of my line. I will not let that sanctimonious vulture steal my crown. I will marry again. Now." The decision is a thunderclap, an act of pure, desperate defiance. The king's ministers are thrown into a frantic, high-stakes search. The political calculations are desperate. Who would be willing to marry a 4-5-year-old, gout-ridden, and famously cursed king whose last 3 wives are all dead? The choice is made with astonishing speed. A candidate is found, one who is both politically suitable and, most importantly, young and healthy. She is Maria Cristina of Naples, his niece. She is 23, vibrant, and known for her intelligence and charm. The alliance is sealed in a matter of weeks. The final, desperate gamble for an heir is on. Dr. Miquel receives the news with a profound, sickening sense of déjà vu. He feels like a man in a recurring nightmare. He pictures the young, 16-year-old Maria Josepha, her face a mask of terror, her piety a useless shield. Now, a new lamb is being led to the slaughter. A new, vibrant 2-3-year-old woman is to be sacrificed to the king's curse, to his brutal, unmanageable physical abundance. He prepares his medical bag for the new queen's arrival. His heart is heavy. He expects no miracle. He expects only to be the physician to yet another tragedy, to watch this young woman, Maria Cristina, break and wither, just as the others did. The king is on a razor's edge. His health is failing. His time is dwindling. Don Carlos and his faction are watching, their faces masks of outrage. furious that their inheritance is being threatened by this last desperate act. The entire unstable future of Spain now rests not just on this one last chance marriage, but on a dark, physical secret that Dr. Miquel is certain will doom it to failure before it even begins. He prepares himself for the inevitable, unaware that this new queen is not like the others. She is not a victim, she is a pragmatist, and she is about to change everything. December 1829. The court of Madrid, which had been paralyzed by the king's despair and the quiet, triumphant waiting of Don Carlos's faction, is now thrown into a new, frantic flurry of activity. The final, desperate gamble has been made. A fourth marriage has been arranged with astonishing speed. The bride, Maria Cristina of Naples, is already on her way. Dr. Miquel prepares for her arrival with a deep, weary cynicism. He is no longer a hopeful physician, he is a custodian of a recurring tragedy. He has seen this play 3 times before. He has seen the political hopes, the public celebrations, and the private, agonizing descent into terror, failure, and death. He readies his familiar, useless tonics for female nerves and prepares his ears for the inevitable, whispered rumors of the new queen's frailty or delusion. He is, he feels, simply preparing a new room in the asylum. The new queen arrives. And from the first moment she steps down from her carriage into the cold, thin air of the Madrid winter, Dr. Miquel realizes this time is different. She is not a frail, timid girl like Maria Isabel. She is not a terrified, cloistered novice like Maria Josefa. Maria Cristina is 23, full of Neapolitan vibrancy, with intelligent, appraising eyes that miss nothing. She is not a child to be sacrificed. She is a woman who understands that marriage is the currency of queens, and she has come to make a political bargain. She meets the king's sullen, appraising gaze not with a flinch, but with a look of polite, unshakable, and confident composure. The royal wedding is a swift, opulent affair. The king, buoyed by this new injection of youth and vitality, seems almost hopeful. The Carlist faction, for their part, looks on with smug indifference, certain that this new foreign woman will break and fail just as the others did. The palace holds its breath. The wedding night arrives. Dr. Miquel is in his study, waiting. He does not sleep. He is waiting for the inevitable, frantic summons that has always come the call for a physician to attend a terrified, weeping, or unwell new queen. The hours tick by. The palace is silent. The summons does not come. He is called to the Queen's chambers the next morning, as is his duty. He enters, his medical bag in hand, his mind prepared for the familiar scene of trauma and tears. He finds a scene he could never have anticipated. The Queen is not in bed. She is dressed, sitting in a chair by the window, calmly taking her morning chocolate. She is alone, having dismissed her ladies in waiting. She looks up as Dr. Miquel enters, and her gaze is not one of a victim. It is the sharp, analytical gaze of a manager. "Dr. Miquel," she says, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you for coming. We have a situation that requires a practical medical mind." The doctor is so stunned he can barely respond. "Your Majesty, are you unwell?" "I am perfectly well," she says, setting her chocolate cup down. The king, however, is unfortunate. His Majesty, it seems, has been led to believe that the failures of his past marriages were the fault of his wife's frailties or piety. She looks him directly in the eye, a gaze of profound shared intelligence. "You and I are both people of observation. We know this is not a matter of the soul. It is a matter of pure physical mechanics." Dr. Miquel freezes. His blood runs cold. This is the great, unmentionable secret, the anatomical truth that has been the silent, driving engine of this court's entire tragedy. It has been hidden, buried under layers of superstition, poison, and feigned piety. And this young woman, after a single night, has not only identified it, but is now speaking of it to him as calmly as if they were discussing the weather. Your Majesty, he stammers, his professional mask of neutrality all that is protecting him. I would not dare. Of course you wouldn't, she interrupts, not unkindly. To speak of it would have meant your execution, but I am the Queen, and I have no intention of dying of a wasting fever or a botched C-section. This is not a curse, Doctor. It is a problem of engineering. And problems of engineering, she says, a small, confident smile touching her lips, can be solved. She has done in 12 hours what the entire Spanish court has failed to do in 15 years. She has named the problem. She has stripped away the Gothic horror, the superstition, and the royal shame, and has reduced the curse to a simple, logistical challenge. Dr. Miquel stands in the bright morning light of the Queen's chamber, his mind reeling. He had prepared himself for another passive, suffering victim. He has found, instead, an active, pragmatic, and intelligent problem solver. The previous queens had met the king's problem with terror and submission, a reaction that only fed his rage and humiliation. Maria Cristina has met it with a calm, almost scientific lack of fear. He realizes, in that moment, that the entire dark, bloody history of this reign has just turned on a pivot. This woman is not a lamb for the slaughter. She is a survivor. She is a politician. And she is not going to let a simple, if bizarre, anatomical anomaly stand in the way of her becoming the mother of a king. The curse, for the first time, is not facing a victim. It is facing an engineer. The air in the palace has changed. After the arrival of Queen Maria Cristina, the grim, suffocating pall of defeat that hung over the court has been replaced by a new, sharp, and uncertain energy. The Carlist faction, the supporters of Don Carlos, are still smug, still certain of their eventual victory. They have seen this play before. A new, young queen arrives, full of life, and the royal bedchamber, with its dark, unspoken curse, slowly, inevitably, breaks her. They give this new marriage 6 months, perhaps a year, before she too succumbs to a wasting fever or a profound melancholy. Dr. Miquel, for his part, is a man in a state of quiet, professional torment. He waits for the inevitable, heartbreaking summons, the call to attend a weeping, terrified, or physically distressed young woman. But the summons does not come. Instead, a week after the royal wedding, he receives a different kind of summons. A formal, written request, delivered by one of the Queen's own Neapolitan ladies in waiting, to attend Her Majesty in her private study, not her bedchamber, at his convenience. He arrives at the appointed hour, his medical bag in hand, his mind filled with a familiar, weary dread. He finds the Queen not in a state of distress, but seated behind a small, elegant desk, reviewing what look like household accounts. She is alone, having dismissed her attendants. She is the picture of calm, pragmatic industry. Dr. Miquel, she says, her voice clear and bright, lacking any trace of fear. Please, sit. I have not summoned you for a medical complaint, but for a consultation. An engineering consultation, one might say. Miquel, stunned, takes the indicated seat. His entire career at this court has been a dance of euphemisms, of unspoken truths, of managing hysterics and paranoia. He has no idea what this means. Maria Cristina leans forward, her intelligent eyes fixed on his. Doctor, she says, I am a practical woman. I have been raised to understand that my primary duty as Queen of Spain is to provide an heir. I do not intend to fail. She pauses, and Dr. Miquel feels a cold sweat on his brow. I am also, the Queen continues, her voice dropping to a calm, clinical whisper, not a fool, nor am I a terrified child like, perhaps, my predecessor. I am aware of the difficulties of this court. I am aware of the tragic fates of the king's previous wives, and I am aware that the king, my husband, is a man of a unique physical conformation. Dr. Miquel freezes. His heart seems to stop. The secret, the unnameable, anatomical truth that has destroyed 3 women and haunted his own conscience for a decade, has just been spoken aloud, in plain, direct language, by a 2-3-year-old woman who has been in the palace for a week. Your Majesty, he stammers, the words catching in his throat. Please, doctor, she says, with a small, impatient wave of her hand. Do not be alarmed. I am not accusing. I am solving. I am a Neapolitan. We are a practical people. This is not a divine curse. It is not a matter of sin or piety. She leans in closer, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. It is a simple, mechanical problem. A problem of physics and geometry. Dr. Michel can only stare, his mind reeling. After years of dealing with Ferdinand's sullen rages and Maria Josepha's terrified prayers, this woman's calm, scientific pragmatism is the most shocking thing he has ever encountered. She continues, "The king, my husband, is a man of great vigour. His abundance, as we shall call it, is the problem. It causes pain. It causes damage. A direct union is not only agonizing, it is, as his past suggests, dangerously counterproductive." She then taps a blank piece of parchment on her desk. "So, doctor, as a man of science, as an anatomist, you will help me solve it. If the issue is one of alignment, of a disproportionate physical reality, can we not simply create a buffer, a spacer, something to manage the geometry of the act?" Dr. Michel feels a dizzying, almost hysterical sense of relief. He is not being asked to prescribe a useless, faith-based tonic. He is not being asked to lie. He is being asked, for the first time in his royal career, to be a physician and an engineer. "Yes," he says, his voice hoarse, his mind suddenly, brilliantly alive with possibilities. "Yes, Your Majesty, I believe such a thing is possible. A device, a cushion." "Exactly," she says, smiling. "A cushion, but a special one, designed for a single purpose." For the next hour, the most bizarre and, perhaps, the most important medical consultation of the 19th century takes place. Dr. Michel, the Queen's physician, and Maria Christina, the new Queen, with a piece of charcoal and parchment, begin to design the solution. They speak in low, clinical, anatomical terms. They discuss materials. It must be firm, but yielding. Horsehair, perhaps, packed tightly. It must be covered in the finest, softest damask, to prevent chafing. It must be of a precise thickness, calculated by Michel to the inch. And finally, the key. It must be perforated. A carefully placed, reinforced opening in the centre, an aperture that would allow for consummation but would protect the Queen's body from the dangerous, physical entirety of the King's abundance. Dr. Michel leaves the Queen's study, his head spinning, the simple revolutionary sketch clutched in his hand. The Queen, with her Neapolitan practicality, will handle the King. She will present this not as a solution for his flaw, an idea that would send him into a murderous rage, but as a delicate accommodation for her, a small, special pillow to aid her frail constitution in receiving his great, Bourbon vigour. It will flatter his ego while solving the problem. That night, Dr. Michel does not wait in his study for a summons. He waits, by order, in a small antechamber next to the royal bedchamber. He is not here to treat a terrified, weeping woman. He is here as a medical consultant, waiting for the results of a clinical trial. He listens. The palace is silent. He hears no screams. He hears no weeping. He hears no door slam, no enraged, frustrated curses from the king. After a time, the king emerges. He does not look at Michel. He simply nods, once a curt, business-like acknowledgement, and walks to his own chambers. Michel then enters the Queen's room. He finds her not in a state of collapse, but sitting in her nightgown, calmly brushing her hair. She looks up at him, her face tired, but composed. She gives him a small, weary, and profoundly triumphant smile. "The engineering was sound, Doctor," she says, her voice quiet. "You may go." Dr. Mikel walks back to his quarters, the world feeling surreal, almost comical. The great, dark, Gothic curse that has haunted the Spanish throne for decades, a curse that has killed 2 queens and driven a third to madness, has been defeated. Not by a papal decree, not by a prayer, not by a magic potion, but by a small, perforated horsehair pillow. 1830. The year begins with a profound, almost unbelievable shift in the atmosphere of the royal palace. The dark, oppressive, and sterile gloom that has haunted the court for decades has vanished. In its place is a new, fragile, and almost giddy sense of hope. The source of this change is the Queen, Maria Cristina. Since her arrival, she has operated not as a victim, but as a pragmatic administrator. The dark, unspoken curse of the king's bedchamber, a topic that has been met with terror, superstition, and tragic death for 3 reigns, has been coolly assessed and solved with the practicality of an engineer. The device, the simple, perforated cushion that Dr. Mikel helped her design, has worked. Dr. Mikel's role, once that of a helpless, silent witness to tragedy, has been transformed. He is now the most important man in Spain. He is the guardian of the royal pregnancy. The king, Ferdinand VII, is a man reborn. The sullen, paranoid, and gout-ridden tyrant has been replaced by a man filled with a boisterous, almost manic joy. He is ecstatic. He has, in his mind, finally and truly won. He has proven his virility, a fact he flaunts at every opportunity. He has silenced the whispers. And, most importantly, he sees the look of cold, furious disbelief on the face of his brother, Don Carlos. The Carlist faction, so certain of their impending inheritance, is now in a state of chaos, their world upended by a simple pillow and a pregnant Neapolitan. Dr. Mikel's days are now consumed by the Queen. He sees her every morning and every evening. He is no longer prescribing useless nerve tonics to a terrified girl. He is managing the most important pregnancy in the world. He monitors her diet, her airings, her sleep. The entire, massive weight of the Spanish Empire, its political stability, its future, the prevention of a civil war now rests on the healthy gestation of this single, unborn child. The Carlist faction, desperate, begins a new war of whispers. The child, they murmur, cannot be the king's. The curse is real, they insist. The new, pragmatic queen must have taken a lover. The heir must be a bastard. Dr. Mikel, as the physician who attends both king and queen, becomes the silent, central figure in this political storm. His clinical presence, his constant monitoring of the queen, is the court's only bulwark against the rumours. He, who knows the true anatomical secret, must now project an aura of absolute, boring, medical normalcy. His very silence, once a shield for the king's shame, is now a shield for the queen's honour. The months pass. The pregnancy is healthy. The queen is strong. In October 1830, the time arrives. The royal birthing chamber is, like everything else in this court, a public stage. It is crowded with ministers, ladies-in-waiting, and physicians, all silent witnesses to the great dynastic event. Dr. Mikel is at the forefront, his face a mask of professional calm, his heart pounding with the weight of the moment. The king himself paces in an antechamber, his anxiety a palpable force. The birth is, blessedly, unlike the horror of 1818. It is long, it is difficult, but it is not a catastrophe. Maria Cristina is strong, her will focused. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, the child is born. A healthy, powerful cry fills the room. The chief midwife lifts the infant. The room holds its breath. The future of Spain hangs in this single, tense moment of inspection. The midwife turns, her face a mixture of joy and a strange, political apprehension. "It is a glorious child, Your Majesty," she announces, her voice trembling slightly. "A strong, healthy infanta. A daughter." A strange, confused ripple passes through the room. A daughter. Dr. Michel's own relief at a healthy birth is instantly overshadowed by a cold, dawning dread. He knows what this means. The king is summoned. He bursts into the room, his face alight with the joy of a new father. He takes the small, bundled child in his arms, his eyes wet with tears. He is overjoyed. He has a child. His line is secure. One of his ministers, a gaunt man known to be sympathetic to the Carlist cause, steps forward, his voice a dry, formal rasp. "1,000 congratulations, Your Majesty. The Infanta is a beautiful princess, and God has confirmed your brother, Don Carlos, as the rightful heir to the throne." The king's joy freezes, his smile vanishing. He turns, his gaze lethal. "What?" "Salic law, Your Majesty," the minister continues, bowing. "The ancient law of the Bourbons. A woman may not inherit the throne. Your brother, Don Carlos, remains your heir." Dr. Michel stands in the corner, a silent witness to the final, terrible, and most profound irony of this entire saga. He has watched this court, this king, destroy 3 women in the desperate, all-consuming quest for an heir. He has guarded the king's dark, physical secret. He has participated in the bizarre, almost comical engineering of a solution, and it has worked. The curse has been broken. The domestic, personal, and anatomical problem has been solved. A healthy child has been born, but in solving it, they have merely exchanged one crisis for another, one that is 1,000 times larger. The king's joy as a father is now at war with the ancient, ironclad laws of his own kingdom. The birth of this small, healthy girl, Isabella, has not ended the succession crisis. It has just ignited the civil war. 1830. The royal palace is no longer a tomb haunted by the ghosts of dead queens. It is a nursery in waiting. The air of quiet, paranoid gloom has been replaced by a new, frantic, and almost giddy energy. The court, which had been paralyzed by the king's despair and the quiet, triumphant waiting of Don Carlos's faction, is now entirely focused on one person, the new, pregnant queen. Dr. Michel's life has been completely transformed. He is no longer the keeper of a dark anatomical secret, a prescriber of useless nerve tonics. He is now the most important physician in the Spanish Empire, the guardian of the royal succession. His days are spent in constant, anxious attendance on Queen Maria Cristina. He monitors her food, her exercise, her rest. He, who knows the true, fragile, and almost farcical nature of how this pregnancy was achieved, feels the weight of the entire kingdom on his shoulders. The king, Ferdinand VII, is a man reborn. The sullen, gout-ridden, and paranoid tyrant has vanished, replaced by a man performing a role he has always craved, the potent, virile father of the nation. His health seems to have miraculously improved. He hosts hunting parties, he holds feasts, he fawns over his young wife, his joy and relief so immense it borders on the manic. He is, Dr. Michel observes, performing his virility for the court, a triumphant, public vindication against the whispers that have haunted his entire reign. But the Carlist faction, the supporters of Don Carlos, are not defeated. They are simply waiting. They have one last, unassailable defense. An ancient, ironclad tradition. Salic law. Salic law, the ancient legal code of the Bourbon line, explicitly forbids a woman from inheriting the Spanish throne. The Carlists, in their rigid piety, are now smugly confident. They watch the queen's belly grow, and they pray for a girl. A daughter would be a personal joy for the king, perhaps, but a political irrelevance. A daughter would mean that Don Carlos, as the next male in line, is still the undisputed heir. October 10th, 1000. 830. The Queen goes into labor. The palace is thrown into a state of high, prayerful tension. Dr. Mikel, his face a mask of professional calm, presides over the birth. The king paces the antechamber, his boisterous confidence now a mask for a raw, desperate fear. The entire future of Spain hangs on the events in this one room. The labor is long, but it is not the medical horror of 1818. Maria Cristina is strong, pragmatic, and healthy. Finally, as dawn breaks, a single healthy cry pierces the air. Dr. Mikel and the midwives act quickly. The child is washed, examined, and wrapped in royal silks. The chief midwife, her face a strange mixture of joy and deep political apprehension, carries the infant into the antechamber and kneels before the king. "Congratulations, Your Majesty," she says, her voice trembling slightly. "God has blessed Spain with a strong and healthy child. It is an infanta, a princess, a daughter." A collective, stunned silence falls over the ministers and courtiers in the room. Dr. Mikel watches from the doorway. He sees the face of Don Carlos, who is standing in the back, and for a single, unguarded moment, he sees a flash of pure, unmistakable triumph. He has won. The curse has held, in its own way. A girl cannot rule, but they have all misunderstood their king. Ferdinand VII, a man who has lived his life in a prison of his own insecurity and physical shame, does not see a political problem. He looks at the small, swaddled infant, his first healthy child, and his face, so often a mask of sullen rage, breaks. He is, for a moment, not a king, but a father. This child is the living, breathing proof that he is not a monster, that he is not cursed. And his love for this child, combined with his deep, abiding, and lifelong hatred for his brother, forges a new, iron-hard resolve. A few days later, Ferdinand VII summons the full royal council. He is carried into the chamber, his body weak from gout, but his eyes burning with a cold fire. Dr. Mikel stands in his usual place at the back, a silent medical witness. The king announces that he is formally publishing a decree, one his father had written years ago but never enacted. He is issuing the pragmatic sanction of 1830. The decree is a political thunderclap. It is simple, direct, and revolutionary. It abolishes the Salic law of succession. The room explodes. The Carlist nobles are on their feet, shouting. "Treason!" one cries. "This is against all tradition, against the law of God." Don Carlos himself, his face white with rage, steps forward. "Brother," he hisses, his voice shaking with a fury he can no longer conceal. "You cannot. The throne is mine by law. It is my birthright." Ferdinand, who has spent his entire reign reacting, hiding, and lashing out, now, in the final act of his life, becomes decisive. He looks at his brother, and all the accumulated resentment of a lifetime is in his gaze. "The law," Ferdinand says, his voice a low, gravelly rasp, "is my will. And my will is that my daughter, Isabella, is the true and rightful heir to the Spanish throne. Not you." Dr. Mikel stands frozen, watching the political earthquake unfold. The great, dark, Gothic curse of the Bourbons has been undone, not by prayer, not by medicine, but by a simple, perforated pillow. And now, the consequences of that bizarre, pragmatic solution are laid bare. The king's desperate, personal need to prove his own virility, to have a child of his own, has collided with 1,000 years of Spanish legal tradition. The king has chosen his new family over his brother's ambition. He has secured his daughter's future, but he has also, in that same instant, condemned his country. Don Carlos, his face a mask of cold, murderous fury, bows stiffly and walks from the room. His supporters follow. The battle lines have just been drawn. The small, private, and almost comical secret of the royal bedchamber is about to become a public, bloody, and devastating civil war. September 29th, 1833. The royal palace of Madrid is a tinderbox of whispers, a place of held breaths and silent, factional maneuvering. For 3 years, a fragile, impossible peace has been maintained, but now the king is dying. Dr. Miquel stands at the foot of the royal deathbed, no longer a physician, but a simple, helpless witness. The king, Ferdinand VII, is barely 48, but his body, ravaged by a lifetime of indulgence and chronic, agonizing gout, has finally given up. He is a shrunken, pale figure, a shadow of the paranoid tyrant who once ruled this court. Beside him, holding his hand, is his wife, Queen Maria Cristina. She is not weeping. Her face is a mask of calm, political resolve. She is no longer just the pragmatic Neapolitan who solved a bedchamber mystery. She is the Queen Regent in waiting, the mother of the future Queen, and she is guarding her daughter's inheritance with an iron will. On the other side of the palace, in his own apartments, Don Carlos waits. He and his Carlist followers are a coiled spring, a government in the shadows, so certain of their legal and divine right to the throne that they view this final, pathetic death watch as a mere formality before their inevitable ascension. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the king's ragged, shallow breathing stops. Dr. Miquel steps forward, performs his final, solemn duty, leaning in to listen for a heartbeat that is no longer there. He straightens up, his eyes meeting the Queen Regent's. "He is gone, Your Majesty." The room, for a single heartbeat, is absolutely silent. The personal, tragic, and grotesque life of Ferdinand VII is over, and in the next heartbeat, the political, bloody future he created explodes into life. Maria Cristina does not waste a second on grief. She nods, a sharp, decisive gesture. A chamberlain, who had been waiting for this very signal, rushes from the room. Within minutes, the great bell of the Almudena Cathedral begins to toll, its deep, somber voice announcing the death of the king to the city. But this is not a moment of simple mourning, it is a declaration. Before the Carlist faction can even be officially notified, the doors of the royal palace are thrown open. A royal herald, his voice booming over the gathered crowd in the plaza below, reads a proclamation. "The king is dead. Long live the Queen. Long live Her Most Catholic Majesty, Isabella II." The words are a political thunderclap. The infant, Isabella, is declared Queen, and her mother, Maria Cristina, is declared Queen Regent, in accordance with the pragmatic sanction of 1830. The news races through the city, reaching the apartments of Don Carlos. His response is immediate and absolute. He has been preparing for this moment. He issues his own proclamation from his own rival court. He declares the pragmatic sanction an illegal, heretical document. He declares his niece, Isabella, a usurper. He declares himself the one, true, and rightful King of Spain, Carlos V. He calls upon all true, pious, and traditionalist Spaniards to rise up and defend their God, their country, and their legitimate king from the liberal traitors who have stolen the crown. The schism is complete. The war has begun. Dr. Miquel stands on a palace balcony, watching the chaos unfold in the plaza below. He sees a small group of soldiers, loyal to the Queen, tear down a banner of Don Carlos. From a distant street, he hears a new, ominous chant. "Viva Carlos Quinto." The city is splitting in two before his very eyes. He thinks of the long, strange, and secret journey that led to this moment. The king's death, the final natural event of his failed life, has not brought peace. It has been the starting pistol for the war. The immense, national, and bloody succession crisis that now threatens to tear Spain apart is the final, terrible, and direct consequence of a secret he alone has guarded for years. It is the legacy of a king's personal, anatomical shame and the simple, desperate, and catastrophic solution of a small, perforated pillow. Madrid, 1840. The city is a different place. The air is tense, the streets scarred by the memory of war. Dr. Miquel is an old man now, long retired from his service to the crown. He sits in his quiet, book-lined study, a place of rational thought and scientific order, far from the whispered, superstitious madness of the old palace. He is a relic, a man who has outlived the world he once knew. He reads a letter from a colleague in the north, a grim, dry report from the front lines of the First Carlist War. It speaks of battles, of sieges, of entire villages put to the sword. It is a war of brother against brother, a bloody, ideological struggle for the very soul of Spain. The newspapers and the politicians call it a war of tradition versus liberalism, of the church versus the secular state, of the legitimate right of Don Carlos versus the supporters of the young Queen Isabella II. Dr. Miquel puts the letter down, his hand trembling slightly with age. He looks at the rows of his leather-bound medical books. He, more than any man alive, knows the truth. He knows this great, tragic war, which is tearing his country apart, is not about ideology. It is not about tradition. It is not, in its purest, most secret origin, about any of those grand and noble ideas. He knows this war is about an anatomical curiosity. His mind drifts back, as it so often does, to the cold, dark, and desperate halls of Ferdinand's palace. He remembers the ghosts of the first two queens, the frail Maria Antonia and the butchered Maria Isabel, victims of a curse that the court blamed on poison and bad humours. He remembers the profound, terrified piety of the third queen, Maria Josefa, a girl who believed the king was a devil and the marital bed a place of mortal sin. He remembers, with the clarity of a clinical diagnosis, the secret he discovered, the secret he guarded with his own life, the king's macrogenitosomia. He remembers the king's sullen, paranoid rages, the desperate, crude perversions in the slums of Madrid, all a mask for the profound, humiliating insecurity of a man whose body, his very symbol of virility, had made him a reproductive failure. For decades, the entire Spanish state, with all its power, its armies, and its appeals to the Pope, had been held hostage by this one bizarre, physical fact. The curse of the Bourbons was a problem of simple, grotesque, physical geometry. And then he remembers the arrival of Maria Cristina, the pragmatic Neapolitan, the engineer. Dr. Miquel allows himself a small, dry, humorless smile. He thinks of the consultation. He thinks of the secret, charcoal sketches, the discussions of horsehair and damask. He thinks of the final, almost comical, solution that had eluded all the great minds of Spain, a solution that now lay at the heart of this entire bloody conflict. The pillow, a simple, perforated, custom-designed cushion, a piece of upholstered furniture, an almost absurdly practical device that solved a decade of Gothic horror. That pillow, he reflects, is the true mother of the war. That simple, practical device allowed the marriage to be consummated. That consummation produced the infant, Isabella. The birth of Isabella, a daughter, prompted the king, in his newfound fatherly joy, to issue the pragmatic sanction, abolishing Salic law. The pragmatic sanction disinherited Don Carlos, and the disinheritance of Don Carlos ignited the civil war that now rages across the land. Dr. Miquel looks at the letter from the front lines, at the casualty lists, at the talk of thousands dead for the cause of Carlos V. He, the man of science, is the only one who knows the true, secret, and almost perverse lineage of this catastrophe. He can trace the river of blood that is now drowning Spain back to its strange, hidden source. It flows not from a grand political betrayal, but from a simple anatomical abnormality. It flows from the king's secret shame, from a queen's practicality, and from the small, upholstered, and almost farcical device that solved the mystery of the royal bedchamber. The vast, bloody, and far-reaching historical consequences of the Carlist Wars, a conflict that will define Spain for the next 100 years, were all born from the small, perverse, and deeply hidden secret that Dr. Miquel will now, as he closes his eyes, take with him to his grave. And so, the strange, secret story of King Ferdinand's court comes to a close, a quiet, dark, and absurd mystery that plunged an empire into a century of war. It is time to let the dark, paranoid halls of the Madrid palace fade into the past. The whispers and the royal secrets can be left behind. Your only concern now is the quiet comfort of your own room and the deep, restorative rest that awaits. If this strange journey into a royal secret helped you unwind tonight, a quiet like is always deeply appreciated. And if you wish to join us for more journeys into history's hidden chambers, please consider subscribing. Thank you for spending your quiet time with me. May your sleep be peaceful and untroubled by any royal secrets. Until our next story, good night.